Hi, I'm delighted that for this session I have Jill Harden from Groam House Museum here to join us today, and she is going to talk us through Groam at Home, a series of events that they took online, but also a little bit wider about how they engage with their volunteers and their general digital activity over the course of 2020. Jill, delighted to have you with me today. If you could just introduce us to yourself and to the museum and show us your slides, please.
Certainly, thank you. So Groam House Museum is a really small, really small museum based on the Black Isle and to the northeast of Inverness. We're largely run by volunteers. We've got two very part-time members of staff. And so COVID has been a real challenge for us in so many ways. 2020 coincided with a big exhibition that we were doing, but obviously that hardly happened this year. It did happen, but only a little. And a big project that we got funding for from Museums Galleries Scotland. We've had to reversion that in a major way. And the way in which we work in relation to volunteers largely meeting and greeting and guiding people in the museum, and a small number of volunteers working on the collections. Obviously that changed dramatically. And the whole thing has been an experience, as it has for everybody else, but one which I feel, hopefully coming out of COVID, we've learned an awful lot from, and it's made us stronger in some ways, very much made us stronger. So as a museum, we've got three collections. That, if you like, the largest physically is the George Beinn collection, which is recognised as being nationally significant. He was an artist working between about 1900 and 1968, basing his work, much of his work, or the part of the work that we're working on at the moment, on Celtic design and how that's reflected on Pictish symbol stones and Pictish early Christian stones, and how that could be used in modern craftsmanship. And that's been a fascinating way in which we've connected with people during this period of COVID. And then we've got two very small collections, one which is our major internationally renowned collection of sculpted stones, and the other which is a tiny collection of local history associated with just Rismarkian fortress on the Black Isle. 2020 also saw the launch of a new website for us, created by a volunteer who is a designer and has worked in the past for museums and does that and continues to do so on a freelance basis. But it gave us the opportunity of actually reviewing how we share our collections. We might not be able to do it, we might not have been able to do it physically, but we can certainly do it virtually. And so you can see across here the ways in which we've started to look at that by doing online lectures, creating podcasts, getting involved in Museums Heritage Highland online exhibition Highland Threads, which has been fantastic, and by doing outreach through work through both Zoom, closed Facebook pages, activities that everybody's got involved in, and that's been a real success as well.
And can I just ask quickly, when you were saying you launched the website just last year as well, so did you then look to sort of reevaluate how you were going to do that as the pandemic hit, or was a lot of what you were planning on how you were going to show your collections online something that you were considering anyway?
Quite a bit of it we were already planning anyway. So our big Museums Galleries Scotland project was to digitise the George Beinn Celtic art collection, and so that is a continuation of that. But the way in which we've brought to the front the Groam at Home idea, so the actual way in which you enter our website now is much more focused on what we're doing, what people can do from home, rather than what people can do by visiting and that side of things. We've definitely changed the emphasis on that side of things. Thank you. Sort of thing, we've been looking at ways in which we can share the collection as a whole, if you like. So we very recently started to produce local history online, our doorways to the collection. And that was purely a COVID reaction. We were very fortunate to get a National Heritage Lottery Fund, the National Lottery Heritage Fund, grant to do this work, facilitated by a museum professional. And that's been great. George Beinn Collection of Celtic Art I've just mentioned. And then we've also done work much more upfront about sharing our exhibitions through an online view of it, so that people can experience the exhibition even though they might not be able to actually visit it. Our museum is so small that at the moment with COVID, we're only able to take one family group at a time, which is like 4 visits on a Saturday afternoon and a Sunday afternoon. Gradually, we're expanding that to 5 afternoons a week, but it's tiny in comparison to most museums. So it's really difficult. And the only way we can share what we've done physically is actually to do it online, and hopefully people are enjoying that. But we've been doing a whole range of other things in relation to sharing collection. So with working with volunteers, it's been a real eye-opener. Most of our volunteers meet and greet, a very, very small number work on the collections. And that's changed this year in that we've been desperate to keep in touch with volunteers, which we've done through virtual meetings, but quite a few are very elderly. They don't like Zoom. So we've been keeping in touch by phone. And when we've been able to, going and knocking on doors and just checking that people are okay and having a chat. But this has been one way of actually doing much more with people. We've got a good collection of photos which have been digitized, a growing collection, a growing number of photos of the collection which can be brought into things. And so what we've done is we've looked at what we've done in the past and said, right, well, in the past, this physical exhibition was created. We've still got the labels, we've still got the photographs of the objects or the photographs. How can we actually bring that alive? And volunteers have been working to help with it in relation to both producing text, which 2 people are currently doing for new topics, and also actually talking to people and getting more information about what people's memories are, or what people have been doing more recently, craft-wise. And so you've both got an opportunity to, in this one about the lemonade factory in Fortress, you've got an opportunity to listen to an interview that we did with a couple who were actual artists and who'd done an exhibition at Inverness Museum Art Gallery in 2017, and talk about their connection to lemonade bottles of the past. It's quite good. And obviously, how can you then also use things like photographs, or what information can we get from the web that we can share with people because it's for free? And so we've started creating jigsaws that people can do online, quizzes, and in certain instances like here, well, how do you make fizzy lemonade? And can you do it with your kids? Yes, you can. So it's very much a community thing. And the great thing about this work, through the funding that we got from the National Lottery, was that we've now got a whole range of guidance notes which we can take into the future. And that's very much what we've been really determined to do, that we will have a legacy from anything that we've done during this COVID period that can be taken forward for either continuing with our digital version, which is what this will be, but we're also going to do these as pop-ups. So pop-ups in the museum, but also why not pop-ups which other museums have done in empty shop windows, our local library, the local cafe, because these are so small, these mini displays, we could do them anywhere. And we've got the guidance, we've got some content, we're creating new content, and that's what we're really looking forward to. Having the foil of, well, you can look at it digitally, but why not go and see the real thing? Because that's what museums are all about. Absolutely. So that'd be good, and not just in the museum, but other places.
Absolutely. And were volunteers helping you put together these mini exhibitions at home? So were you sort of letting them access some of the images online, or were you doing doorstep drops, or how were they sort of getting the kind of the content for them to look at?
So most of it was done in this instance, most of it was done online, in that we have a Google Drive where we keep everything. We give people, there are certain areas which not everybody can access, but these areas we just send people a link. They can to specific folders of photographs, content of text, which they can then read out of. The door drops were things like books, reading. Yeah, it's actually been from my perspective, it's actually been surprisingly straightforward. It's been good because it's been very small, very small themes. People have really got to grips with it. And the excitement of finding somebody who's got a story to tell, whether it's about today or in the past related to the theme, that's been a real challenge, but I think people have really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's great that you've been able to connect with those volunteers that were comfortable with adapting to using things online, but also being able to connect with those that weren't, who were still wanting to do things more in the physical world, and that you've thought of a life for the project beyond COVID as well. I love that. It's got a real circular kind of feel.
Yeah, that has been important to us. Yeah. So and these are just examples of the guides of what Jen was able to leave us with. There are a couple of other ones as well, but just to give an idea about, right, anybody can do this. We've got a program now of hopefully one every 2 or 3 months. There'll be a new one coming up. As I say, there's 2 being prepared by 2 different volunteers at the moment. Yeah, should work well.
Yeah, those are lovely. We must use those actually to share, I think, around the sector, because I think,
yeah, well, that's the other thing actually, which we've been quite keen on in relation to the Museums Galleries Scotland funded project, has been that if we're going to be doing things, it shouldn't just be us that benefits from a public grant, it should be anybody, and we're very keen to share any guidance notes or training videos or whatever they might be with Museums and Heritage Highland members. Or we could actually, I mean, we haven't thought about this yet, but I mean, I'm guessing we could actually share them more widely. So yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Good legacy.
Yeah, so we've been, as well as doing, so that sort of focusing on our volunteers and and how we can keep in touch with them, both socially and through work, if you like. One of the other things we've been doing is looking at events associated with either the local history project or, in this case, the George Beinn project, and seeing, right, we're going to have to completely refocus how we do the Museums Galleries Scotland project of digitising the George Beinn Celtic art collection. It's always been an important part of it has always been to do with outreach and events and inclusivity for people's involvement. How on earth do you do that now that we can't do it actually physically? We were always going to do it more broadly than the Black Isle and the Inverness area, but we thought about that in relation to going to village halls and doing things, because we've done that in the past across the Highlands and across into Moray and beyond. But what we were going to do, and so that has been hard. Thank goodness for Zoom. I mean, none of us had heard of Zoom before, had we? It was like
no, we seem to live
so. We've sort of strayed into well, George Beinn was fascinated by Celtic art, but he also wanted local craftspeople to use standard Celtic art, adapt it, and use it to create modern items for sale. And he saw it as an economic boon for particularly the Highlands. And so what we've been doing is looking at the collection for digitising it and providing information about it, but also sort of how could we share aspects of that with people, and potentially people across the world. And so one of our volunteers is a very keen knitter and is heavily involved in other knitting groups and knit and chats and that sort of thing, both physically going to a group. And she suggested having a knit along, which actually worked brilliantly. So we advertised it through various, we did background research to find out about other groups that are doing knitting and how we could advertise it. And we ended up with something like over 90 people signing up for the knit along through a closed Facebook page. And that they were coming not just from Scotland, but from across the UK and across the world, which was like, wow. amazing. So, you know, there was even somebody from Australia, and I mean, it was ridiculous because she was online, but I mean, it wasn't her, you know, the time was completely wrong for us. So whereas we could have sent her a recording, but we didn't. And it's like, oh, well, we'll know that for next time. We must sort of say we can provide things to your time frame. So, but that worked really well. We had mini presentations within the Knit Along Chat Along. Our volunteer Barbara had used the George Beinn design that you create a woolly hat. We called it the Beinn's Toorie Bunnet. So it's a woolly hat with a bobble on the top, with an interlaced design on it. Everybody, something like 30 people had a go, and there was you sent your photograph in at the end, and there was just a random pull out of who would get a gift from the person who produced the yarn for the knitting kits that we produced, as a congratulations. And doing that, I don't think we've really ever done that side of things from a creative perspective, you know, creating something which we could then go into a knitting pack, which we could then sell online, both through our own website, through Julie, who produced the yarns, and also through a commercial knitting website where you can sell patterns and that sort of thing. And that to us was surprisingly successful, and is something that we will take forward in the future in relation to producing craft goods that people can create based on George Beinn work, and the skills of our own volunteers, because we don't just have knitters in our volunteers. You know, there's an embroideress, there are other people who do other things. So we're really keen to actually share that side of George Beinn's work.
And did you find the people that were connecting with this project, were they an existing audience who were just connecting more deeply with you, or were you managing to reach new people? And do you know how you were reaching those new people? Or?
So there were only amongst the people that I saw online, I think it was less than 10% were people who knew about Groam House. The rest were all avid knitters. And there is a knitting fraternity which is worldwide, which link into opportunities to do something a bit different. And they were clearly quite at ease with how the thing was running. We were really nervous about it, and we said this to them: we've never done this before. Please bear with us. But they were involved. They enjoyed the wee presentations that we organised about wool and yarn, and about spinning and dyeing. Yes, it was brand new to us, and they've been back in touch saying, right, so when are you doing the next one? Which is always a good sign, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. But it's great to be able to connect to that sort of, I guess, diaspora of knitters.
Yes, definitely. And we connected through, and obviously we also we shared who was George Beinn and why are we doing this, and also shared the other knitting sides of things that are going on at the moment associated with not just Groam House Museum, but obviously Highland Threads. And we did an online talk from Lucy Haig, who is a really renowned knitting designer, in using interlace and different patterns and Celtic patterns. So it was quite a suite of work, and what we're looking at now is how we learn from what we've done this time round and do something more in September, when the project is coming to its culmination of full launch and that side of things. So yes, we're really looking forward to that. We've learned a lot, which is what a lot of this is all about, and ways in which we can look in the future about using it with or without COVID. Absolutely.
It sounds like you have a great framework for building other projects around now.
Hope so. Fingers crossed. So very quickly, so the other area, and I've mentioned it several times, has been the George Beinn collection of Celtic art, and it was something that was already set up well before COVID struck. We had obviously the actual design side of things, which it was always expected that would be done online. But the whole project was predicated on training sessions for new volunteers as well as existing volunteers to learn how to write engagingly, so interpretive writing, but creative writing based on items in the collection, and also others who are more interested in photography, how to photograph museum objects. And actually doing that in a time of COVID, it's been really hard. We ran them online through Zoom. We advertised them as we would have done, whether or not it would have been COVID restricted. The photography ones worked really well. In all ways, we got a lot of take up for those. We had too many people, in fact, so that was good. We've ended up with a training video that anybody can watch and learn from, and added skills. We know that we're going to have to rerun those internally with those volunteers who came along once we can open up the collections for that to happen. The interpretive writing workshops, fantastic, absolutely fantastic trainers. They were brilliant, but for whatever reason, we didn't quite hit the market right, which I found quite interesting. So that was another learning curve. So it wasn't like the knit along and that side of things, but we're going to try again come later this year to actually relearn that and actually reactivate that. But we have got a core of writers, which I'm really pleased about. It's between 4 and 6, but they're all existing volunteers. They're not new volunteers, which was a shame to us. Whereas with the photographers, we got a lot of new volunteers through that. But everybody's learning how to write. We've got good guidelines. We are getting better at it, we hope, and we'll see how people react to the new website and what they can do with it.
And is it just for writing interpretation for the website?
So
or
the other thing that we learned about was...
Sorry, I think we just...
Say that again?
I was just going to say, is it writing for the website, or was it also for interpretation in the museum as well?
It's largely purely for the website, okay. But we're obviously linking that into our cataloguing system so that information can be immediately drawn out or reversioned for small displays in the museum. Yeah. So one of the other things that we've learned is that actually, how do you share information, which goes back to what you were asking about, door drops or virtually, and it's all been with this side of things. It's all been virtual, and our writers have been great because we've used Padlets, and I'd never come across a Padlet before. But it's something where you can post and put up more, and lots of PDFs and bits of videos, and you can chat, and it's been a real eye-opener. And because everything's in the same place, you don't have to share links, and it's I think it's for many people it's been much easier to use than a sharing of links, and particularly where those links are being shared with people who aren't volunteers, who've gone through a volunteer application process, or that as they do with the museum to make sure, for a variety of reasons. This has been a great way of sharing material more widely, but in effect in a closed group. And that's been a learning experience too. I'm very pleased that we found them.
Yeah, that's great. I hadn't used a Padlet before last year either, but they are very handy.
Yeah. And really, that's what we've been about. We've been doing a lot, as everybody has. We've been doing a lot online, where it's been a straight transfer of, well, we always do lectures, but normally it's in the small village of Rosmarkie. We get an audience of anywhere between 30 and 60, depending on the topic. But this way, through Zoom, we can advertise much more widely, and we can be really surprised about where people come from. And outreach, we normally do some of that, but certainly the knit along has shown that it can be a much more positive experience through the different media. And Training, well, you can actually take more trainees through a Zoom, even though you're restricting it to 10 people. That's probably more than we would have had in our training space. So it's, you know, there are swings and roundabouts in relation to all of this. I think I think the one positive has been it's made us think a lot more about who we want to connect with, which is a wide variety of people for different reasons, whether it be local history or a Celtic artist or whatever, a Pictish expert, how we can do that in different ways, virtually as well as physically. And that's something that we're really going to take forward in the future in relation to the way in which we've learnt about facilitating access to the collection, but not actually the collection, the virtual collection. And I'm hoping that when people can actually see the real collection, the wow factor is, oh, I didn't realize it was that big, or my goodness, isn't it tiny? And that side of things, because it is the one thing you don't get from books or from the web is size and texture and the, you know, that wow factor. You can make things look brilliant in a photograph, but actually what does it really look like? And what's it, and could you do the same, and all of that. I just think, yes, the physical thing is so important, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I don't think we'll ever lose that. One thing I just want to touch on quickly was the lecture series. A lot of museums were taking events online, but they weren't charging. And a lot of museum content people were putting up for free. But you were brave and you still charged for yours, and you found it worked, didn't you? It didn't put people off.
Yeah.
People were engaging, yeah.
You're absolutely right. So there was quite a discussion about it. You know, is this the right thing to do? And yeah, we decided to continue with the charging structure that we already had. And it certainly, has it put people off? I don't know. We know we've had, from our perspective, we have had very, very good take up. So there was a lecture on an academic lecture on Pictish art. Well, sorry, Pictish stones in particular. And that I think there was something like 180 people, 100 people at that. No, that was a real surprise to us. I mean, we couldn't believe that. Because we hadn't particularly advertised it beyond the normal range of ways in which we advertise. The Lucy Haig talk on knitting, niche, our chairman said, well, you'll be lucky if you get more than 30 people, you know. But niche is good because we marketed it through that niche, and we got, I don't know, something like 80 people, somewhere between 80 and 100 again. So it was like, yes, it was. I know it was something that I'm very much for giving things away for free, but actually they did, you know, the right decision was made, and it also means that, you know, that people are going to come rather than say they're coming and not coming. And that's the other side of things, because we've been doing things through art ticketing rather than Eventbrite. There's a top, I don't know whether it's to do with the subscription we pay or whatever. We have a top number of 100. So actually charging means that we are going to, we know that if 100 people have paid, they're likely to come. So I don't know whether that was one of the factors which helped the decision-making process, but yeah, and it's been well worth it. It really has.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think of the numbers you would have had possibly in just a physical lecture, yeah, I would, yeah, it's still better. And I think that's one thing we are finding with the few museums who are brave to charge, is that people are mostly happy to pay. And as you say, it also then gives you that confidence when you have a free sign up. Not everybody's there, so you also know what your audience is going to be, and they are happy to pay, and they're valuing their product, and they're helping support your museum to keep going in a difficult time. And actually in the future, as funding models change, it hopefully gives you an avenue to keep looking and building on those funds in the future.
Yeah, so the knit along that was, I mean, you could come along to the knit along, and in effect that was free, although you had to pay for your pattern or pay for the knitting kit. But actually, people also gave donations. It was like, wow, we hadn't expected that. So yes, people are very appreciative of things that they can get in, or seem to be very appreciative of things they can get involved in, and wanting to see them continuing in the future, and recognizing that we are very fragile. I mean, that's the one other thing about, I would have to say from our museum's perspective, is that we've been very, very fortunate in the support that we've been given through the local authority, through the National Lottery Fund, through Museums Galleries Scotland, the way in which we can come together through Museums in Heritage Highland. That has been a serious eye-opener as well. It's made us more, in a way, it's made us more adventurous than we might have been in the past in relation to the sorts of grant applications we've made. Yes, that's been quite interesting as well. And I think we haven't reviewed that side of things yet, but I'm sure we will do, because it's something to consider for the future in relation to where we think we're going. In relation to our strategy and how we get there, and the imaginative ways in which we can take things forward. I think it's given us a bit more confidence, which seems daft because of COVID, but I think that is, I think that's been a very interesting aspect as well.
So that brings us a nice point to think about the future and how you begin to, I guess, adapt this into a new hybrid kind of museum. You've got a great, as we said before, sort of framework now for developing a lot of these projects, for keeping your collections digitized online, and for future projects and how to do that. But also in terms of the lecture series, because they were physical and they've been digital, whether you go back to being one or the other, or you try and do both. So, and we've also discussed the fact that it's a capacity challenge for museums in terms of you only have 2 part-time staff members and a lot of very committed and very able and skilled volunteers. What do you think the future looks like, and how you sort of balance that physical and digital museum with the capacity that you currently have?
I think that, I hope that it's giving us a bit more confidence in relation to what we're able to do internally, and the way in which we share that with the wider world. Looking at our visitor, our visitors, the vast majority are visitors because the village is part of a serious tourism centre. They're in a way, a lot of them are passing traffic, and actually what we've always wanted to do is connect more with local community, and how do we do that? And I think that the increasing the digital side of things is actually giving us a bit more confidence about involving people, not necessarily physically coming into the museum, but possibly coming into the museum or coming for a chat somewhere, and actually connecting in that way, and being able to do things much more quickly, if you like, in relation to maybe just putting up a really small display for a month and then changing it again, rather than trying to do something for the 6-month period and local people thinking, well, it's been there for ages, we don't want to go back there again. So actually, I think on a personal level, I'm hopeful that what COVID has started to show us is that we can do things, even though we've got a very small resource base, we can do more things which will involve more people, which will mean that our resource base increases, and we will be able to actually get a newly evolving thing about, well, what does volunteering with Groam House Museum mean, and what does it mean for people within the Fortrose Rismarky area, and the secondary school at Fortrose and that side of things, sort of the way in which we can actually engage better. And I'm hoping that we can engage better, both physically and digitally. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing your journey over the last year. It's been really interesting to have a good glimpse at it, and to really see how you've been very strategic in your response, and I think that's a good lesson for our local sector, but also for the wider sector. So thank you for your time today, Jill.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for asking me. Thank you.